remind me so much of my father. Like some of the humor, because he has a sense of humor too.
Nice.
That people might not know, you know, but those scenes just remind me of my childhood, you know.
For decades, the world has celebrated Bob Marley as a global symbol of peace, resistance, and spiritual resilience. But behind the legend was a man and a family, left with wounds the world never saw.
No, well, when we started making music, my father was the one who helped us to make the music.
Now, Ziggy Marley, Bob's eldest son with wife Rita, is finally breaking his silence. And what he says cuts deep. What happened in their home wasn't tabloid drama. It was something worse. According to Ziggy, she killed him. Ziggy was only 12 when Bob died. What's bad, as he tells it, is having to carry the weight of a legacy and a loss that never truly faded. Let's take a look at what Ziggy Marley has finally said about his father. A childhood marked by violence and chaos. Few people choose to break their silence by opening up about the darkest corners of their childhood. But for Ziggy Marley, talking about the chaos he grew up in isn't just cathartic, it's necessary. It gives people a true insight into the kind of man Bob Marley was. And one particular memory still haunts him. Ziggy was just 8 years old when his world exploded. It wasn't just the fame or the music, it was gunfire. Loud, sudden, and far too close. In December 1976, Bob Marley, his wife Rita, and their children were the targets of a violent assassination attempt at their home in Kingston, Jamaica. Political tensions in the country were reaching a boiling point, and Bob, whether he wanted to be or not, had become a symbol of peace, power, and potential change. That made him dangerous to some and expendable to others. The night of the attack, the Marley children were ripped from their beds, confusion and fear settling in before dawn. Ziggy remembers it vividly. Cops came for us children in the middle of the night and carried us away to a secret hideaway up in the hills. No one really knew what was happening. It was scary, but it was kind of exciting, Ziggy recalls. It's a memory that never left him. But beneath that childish awe was a very real danger. A trauma that would shape how he saw everything. His parents had nearly died. Bob had taken bullets to his chest and arm. Rita had been shot in the head. Yet just 2 days after the shooting, Bob and Rita appeared at the Smile Jamaica concert, determined to play despite being wounded. The event, intended to promote unity amid Jamaica's volatile political divide, went on as planned. For the young Ziggy, that moment did not symbolize bravery in the way it was portrayed in global headlines. It was personal and terrifying. That moment, that atmosphere of chaos, laid the foundation for how he would come to understand the man the world knew as Bob Marley, not just as a father, but as a target, a fighter, and a symbol of defiance. He realized that the Marley home wasn't just a sanctuary of reggae and peace. It was a political battleground. And he was a child raised in that storm, watching his parents survive, perform, and resist with bullet holes still fresh in their skin. Until now, Ziggy had rarely spoken about that night in such raw detail. But the emotional weight of his father's legacy has pushed him to stop protecting the myth. He's finally confronting reality, and revealing what it meant to grow up under siege while the world cheered on a hero. The fighter behind the legend. People love my father, but he had violent tendencies. He was a fighter, Ziggy says bluntly. It's a side of Bob Marley that the public rarely discusses. The world remembers the dreadlocked visionary singing about one love and unity, but Ziggy is now revealing the man behind that message. A man forged in the fire of struggle, someone whose life was far more complicated than the peaceful figure often mythologized in posters and documentaries. To Ziggy, the truth was never that simple. Yes, Bob Marley sang about peace, but he lived in war, internally and externally. Raised in the gritty streets of Trenchtown, Bob's environment demanded more than talent. It demanded grit to survive. That's where Bob learned to stand his ground, not just for himself, but for everything he believed in. The nickname Tough Gong wasn't an artistic alias. It was a street name, earned, not chosen. It spoke to Bob's resilience, his ability to hold his ground, and his reputation as someone who didn't back down. Ziggy doesn't shy away from that image. In fact, he's breaking the silence to show the full truth. Bob wasn't soft. He wasn't just spiritual. He was scarred. He was hardened by experience, and that sometimes manifested as aggression. Ziggy saw it up close. Bob's restlessness wasn't just in the studio or on stage. At home, he was intense, focused, and driven. The energy that fueled his music had to go somewhere else when the guitars were put down, and it often went into sport. Boxing gloves, football boots, running shoes, anything that demanded movement and competition. He was fanatical, Ziggy recalls. It was a big part of his life and my life as a child around him. He loved all sports. He was a sporty guy. But it wasn't just fun. It was an outlet. Even when Bob showed up at Ziggy's primary school, he wouldn't stand on the sidelines. He would join the football matches, playing alongside or against the children. He was fast and he had a good kick, Ziggy laughs. That was his aspiration. The image of Bob Marley chasing a football across a schoolyard may feel at odds with the iconic prophet figure millions worship. But for Ziggy, it was real. It was grounding. But that realness came with pressure. As Bob's fame grew, so did the expectations and the crowds. Ziggy remembers the weight his father carried, people pulling at him, demanding time, attention, money, allegiance. The calm he projected on stage wasn't always there in private. Football helped him free his mind, Ziggy says. It was his way to breathe. But even sport couldn't always ease the pressure, because while Bob was holding up the world, he was also struggling at home, especially in his marriage to Rita. Rita and Bob, a complicated bond. Behind the music, the Marley marriage was complicated. It was built on love, loyalty, jealousy, and betrayal. Ziggy Marley, after years of silence, is finally speaking openly about what he witnessed between his parents. And he's not interested in preserving myths. What he describes isn't a romanticized love story. It's a difficult, tangled partnership, one that endured through infidelity, fame, illness, and shifting roles. Bob had children with multiple women. That wasn't a hidden secret. It became part of the public narrative. But what the world didn't see was how deeply it affected the family. Rita Marley remained by Bob's side, not just as his wife, but as a foundational figure in his personal and professional life. She managed his schedule, performed alongside him, and in the final chapter of his life, when his health collapsed, she became his caregiver as cancer slowly took hold. Still, Ziggy doesn't sugarcoat the pain. In a moment of rare emotional intensity, he said something that cuts deep. She killed him. Emotionally and spiritually. It's the grief of a son who watched love and pain live under the same roof. It's the weight of unresolved tensions, unspoken betrayals, and the slow erosion of trust between two people who could never fully let go. Rita, for her part, had her own affairs. Bob was famously unfaithful. And yet somehow, there was a loyalty that persisted beyond betrayal. A kind of loyalty that outlasted love, even when love had frayed. Bob, according to Ziggy, was deeply possessive of Rita. He didn't want other men even looking at her, while living a life where women came and went. That double standard, that contradiction, created a toxic undercurrent in their bond. It wasn't healthy, but it was theirs. When Bob's health declined, Rita stepped up in ways that no one else could. According to accounts from those closest to the family, she was by his side during the worst of it. She handled the pressure, the chaos, and the emotional load. In those final moments, whatever romance they once had long since faded. What remained was duty, history, and something deeper than either. Ziggy's honesty brings a new depth to how the world views his parents. Bob wouldn't be Bob without Rita, he says. And it's true. Their connection defied categories. It was a partnership shaped by music, survival, and compromise. It may not have resembled the ideal of love, but it was real, and it endured. For the first time, Ziggy is letting the world inside that truth. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't peaceful, but somehow it worked. For a while, until love and loyalty couldn't keep them safe, and Ziggy had to witness his family falling apart in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. London years and the creation of hope. After the shooting in Kingston, Bob fled to London. There, in the quiet of 42 Oakley Street in Chelsea, he found space to heal and to write. The chaos of Jamaica, the threat on his life, and the relentless pull of politics had left him physically wounded and emotionally drained. London offered him a rare moment of calm. It was in that sanctuary, far from the heat of Kingston, that he crafted one of his most hopeful songs, Three Little Birds. The song's optimism. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be all right, became an anthem of reassurance for the world. But for Ziggy Marley, those words held a more complicated meaning. Because while Bob was creating comfort through music, his children were still back in Jamaica, living with the lingering aftermath of the attack and adjusting to life without him. Ziggy, the eldest son, was only 8 at the time. While Bob was working through his trauma in London, Ziggy was navigating school, daily routines, and a home forever changed by violence. He doesn't speak about that period with bitterness, but his tone carries a quiet resignation. When you reflect back, you can feel sad, but in that moment, you gotta do what you gotta do, he says. I had to go to school, there were a lot of things going on, so you just get on with it. That disconnection between father and son wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Ziggy didn't grow up in constant contact with Bob. There were stretches of time when his father was on tour, in studios, or, like during this period in London, operating in a completely different world. And even when he was around, he was rarely just dad. He was Bob Marley, global icon, revolutionary, musician, myth. For a child, that kind of presence creates a strange kind of absence. Ziggy doesn't accuse, he doesn't condemn. But for the first time, he's saying what was left unsaid. Bob wasn't there. Not really. Not when it mattered most. And that truth, quiet, painful, and often buried, shaped Ziggy's life in ways even he is still unpacking. Bob's creative escape to London may have helped birth timeless music, but it also highlighted a growing separation from his children. The world gained 3 little birds, but Ziggy gained the loneliness of a boy waiting for his dad to come home. It was a sacrifice, intentional or not, that shaped both of their lives. And now, Ziggy is finally acknowledging what that absence cost. It didn't break him, but it forced him to become something else, something strong, something independent, something forged in the shadow of a legend. Ziggy's own path and his father's shadow. Ziggy Marley has won 8 Grammy Awards. He's a husband, a father of 4, a philanthropist, and a respected musician. But no amount of success has allowed him to step fully out of his father's shadow. The Marley name is global, and with it comes a legacy so large, even Ziggy's own success can feel like a continuation rather than a separate story. He lives in Los Angeles now, thousands of miles from where it all started, but he still speaks with the same trench-town accent that defined Bob's voice. He carries the tone, the cadence, the cultural imprint, and he carries the weight. Every stage he steps onto is still, in some way, Bob Marley's stage. Every headline that mentions Ziggy also invokes his father. There's always an expectation that I will do covers of Bob Marley songs at live events, but I'm more than happy to do that, he says. Ziggy isn't bitter about the comparisons, but now, with the silence broken, it's clear that honoring a legacy and living under it are 2 very different things. Sometimes Ziggy leans into it. He's done entire tours performing only his father's music. It's not an obligation, it's a tribute. And yet, the emotional toll is real. These aren't just songs to him. They're echoes of a relationship that ended too soon. One song in particular continues to hit the hardest. Redemption Song. It carries a lot of emotional connection for me, he says. It was everywhere around the time of Bob's death. It became the soundtrack to both a public mourning and a private loss. Even now, decades later, Ziggy feels like a mirror for the man the world still reveres. Fans don't just look to him for music, they look to him for continuity. He acknowledges this with grace, but also with an honesty that signals how difficult it's been to balance his identity with the legacy he inherited. My smile is honoring him. I laugh, and it looks like his laugh. Pieces of him are a part of me, Ziggy says. By breaking his silence, Ziggy isn't separating himself from his father. He's simply acknowledging the complexity. He isn't just Bob Marley's son. He's a man who grew up watching the world claim his father. While privately, he was just trying to hold on to whatever part of Bob he could still call his own. And that part, he says, is in his music, his family, and his voice, even when the world insists it belongs to someone else. But there is one small moment that will forever be between father and son. Bob's last words to a boy who had to grow up fast once his father had passed. The final days and words that haunt. Ziggy's last memory of his father is burned into his mind. He was just 12, peeking through the window of a hospital room. Bob, frail and visibly fading, spotted him and summoned him inside. "Hey, well, young Bob, I have a song for you," his father said. Then came the words that would stay with Ziggy for the rest of his life. "On your way up, take me up. On your way down, don't let me down." It wasn't a goodbye in the conventional sense. Bob's message wasn't sentimental. It was a passing of responsibility. In that moment, a dying father wasn't just speaking to his son. He was handing him a legacy. For Ziggy, those words weren't just guidance, they were a burden. Until now, he never spoke at length about what those final moments meant. But in breaking his silence, he reveals a haunting truth. He's been carrying that weight ever since. Not long after that final encounter, Ziggy was in Miami visiting his grandmother when the news came. No one said it outright. There was no formal announcement. Nobody didn't say, "Oh, your father died." Then I saw my sister. I saw her face. I knew. The confirmation came without words, just through the look in a sibling's eyes, a moment frozen in time. Ziggy now admits something he's never said before. He made a quiet deal with God. He told himself that if he could just see his father again, just one more time, he'd be a good boy. But that moment never came. He was just a child, negotiating with the universe, trying to delay the inevitable. What he didn't realize at the time was that Bob's life had already slipped away. In speaking about those final days, Ziggy also exposes a painful critique, one directed not at his father, but at the people who surrounded him. "He had a lot of people around him, but I don't think he had the right people around him," he says. "He was working hard and he was sick, and nobody could, pull the plug and let him rest and heal. I don't respect that at all." Ziggy's voice shifts when he talks about what could have been different. "So I wish that I was around, if I could have given him the right advice. He wasn't getting it right." It's bad, not in a headline-grabbing way, but in the quiet tragedy of a child forced to watch his father fade, not in peace, but surrounded by noise, pressure, and the wrong kind of company. And until now, Ziggy had never said it out loud. But Ziggy remains hopeful that the world will finally see the true Bob Marley through his openness, and a new film aimed at portraying him as more than just an icon, but as a man with real struggles, emotions, and a fighting spirit. The One Love biopic and rediscovering Bob. In 2024, a new biopic titled Bob Marley, One Love hit theaters. It's not just another music film. For Ziggy Marley, who served as a hands-on producer alongside his sister Cedella and mother Rita, it was an opportunity to set the record straight, to peel back the mythology and reveal the full humanity of the man everyone thinks they know. In telling this story, Ziggy is finally speaking in a way he never has before, using film to say what words couldn't. He believes Bob would have loved the result. He would laugh, but one of those proud laughs, Ziggy says. He always wanted to make a movie. He was a creative person. He wanted to make a Western. That detail, Bob's secret desire to make a Western, highlights just how much of his personality was hidden behind the legend. One Love, starring Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob and Lashana Lynch as Rita, aims to show those lesser-known dimensions. It doesn't just focus on the hits or the tours. It delves into the struggle, the personal contradictions, and the relationships that shaped Bob's journey. It portrays not just a reggae icon, but a man fighting his own internal battles while trying to carry a nation's hopes on his shoulders. There's a lot of sides to him that people don't really know, Ziggy says. They will see those sides and connect with them. That connection is what matters most to Ziggy. For years, he's watched the world consume his father through posters, playlists, and slogans. But the man who sat in the hospital and spoke those final words, "On your way up, take me up. On your way down, don't let me down," was more complex than any single narrative could capture. This film, for Ziggy, is not about profit or prestige. It's about legacy. It's about control. It's about reclaiming the story before it's lost to myth. The project forced Ziggy to confront some of his most difficult memories. Working through the script, rewatching key moments of his father's life through actors and staging was emotionally taxing. But it was also necessary. It's one thing to live with memories, he says, but it's another thing to put them on screen and share them with the world. Ziggy has taken a bold step toward the truth by finally opening up about Bob, not only as a musician, but also as a father, partner, and flawed human being. The film may be titled One Love, but it's really about one life, told by the person who knew him in ways no one else could. And finally, Ziggy might be able to heal a little from the absence he's felt for most of his life. It's bad, the weight of absence. What Ziggy mourns most isn't fame or lost wisdom, it's presence. "Daddy was fun," he says. "Him do more than me could ever do. You know what I'm saying. He did so much. It's going to be lasting forever. I miss everything, but mainly the presence." That absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it left a permanent imprint. For most of the world, Bob Marley is frozen in time as a revolutionary force, a musical prophet who never truly aged. But for Ziggy, his father was someone who never got to become the man he might have been. The loss isn't just of a parent, it's of a relationship that had barely begun. Ziggy didn't have time to grow into the bond, to learn from him, or to lean on him when life demanded it most. What was taken was more than a figurehead. It was the most human part of all, a father's day-to-day presence. Even now, when he visits his mother's house, Bob's music fills the space like he never left. "When I don't miss him, I listen to him," Ziggy says. It's a ritual that keeps the memory close, but never truly fills the void. Ziggy believes his father never really disappeared. "His presence is in me. I'm a part of his presence. Every now and again I can see him in me. I can feel him in me, and I can see some of his actions in me." But feeling isn't the same as having. There's always a gap, one that music, legacy, or even time can't fully close. Sometimes when Ziggy plays venues like the Santa Barbara Bowl, he's overtaken by the strange sensation that his father has already stood in the exact same place. You have a little déjà vu type of vibe, and you imagine something like, "Oh yeah, this is where my father played," he says. And you think of him, or what it was like for him to be here. Ziggy's silence wasn't because he had nothing to say, but because it's hard to speak when the world thinks it already knows your story. Now that he's finally opened up, the truth is painfully simple. It's bad. Because Ziggy didn't just lose a father, he lost a future. And he had to grow up surrounded by a version of Bob the world had claimed, not the one he actually knew. Do you think Ziggy Marley has done the right thing by showing the world a different side to Bob Marley? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.